They say success leaves clues. But what if most of those clues are false? What if the stories we follow are only half of the truth, the half that survived? Every day we're surrounded by victories, screens full of wins, charts painted in green, people telling us it's possible and if we just do what they did. But behind every story of success, there's a silent ocean of failure voices that never got heard, lessons that never got shared. The mind, hungry for certainty, only sees what survived. It worships the winners and forgets the fallen. This is the illusion of the markets, the illusion of control, the illusion that if you follow the path of the survivors, you will survive too. But what if true learning begins not from imitation but from understanding? What if the real secret to mastery is not in copying the winners, but in learning how they think, how they feel, how they survive? This is not a story about profits. It's a story about perception, about breaking through the bias that blinds you, about learning right from winners. Welcome to Mind Over Markets. This is Survivorship Bias. You see them everywhere. Screenshots of profits, traders flashing their wins, posting green charts, and calling it freedom. And if you're honest sometimes, you feel it too. That little spark inside that whispers, if they can do it, so can I. You watch their videos, you read their posts, you start to believe there's a secret, a system, a pattern that once discovered will finally set you free. But let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most of the traders you admire aren't showing you the truth, not because they're lying, but because of something deeper, something hidden in the way the human mind processes success. It's called survivorship bias, and it's quietly shaping how you think, how you learn, and how you trade. When you open social media and see a trader turning 10,000 into a million, you're not seeing the 1,000 others who turned 10,000 into nothing. Their charts aren't posted, their voices aren't heard, their lessons buried under the noise of success stories. This is the illusion of visibility. We see what survives, we forget what doesn't. It's the same in every field, in business, in war, and evolution. But in trading, it's deadly, because the mind doesn't just copy what it sees, it identifies with it. You don't just think I could be like them. You begin to feel like you already are. That's where the danger begins. The human brain loves shortcuts. It loves patterns that promise certainty in an uncertain world. When it sees someone succeed, it assumes there's a clear reason behind it. It creates a narrative. They succeeded because they worked hard. They succeeded because they're disciplined. They succeeded because they found the right strategy. And sure, sometimes that's true, but you don't know what else happened behind the curtain. You don't see the failed accounts, the emotional breakdowns, the sleepless nights of doubt, the years of losing before one good year made them famous. You only see the survivor, and the survivor looks like a genius. In the markets, this illusion is magnified 1,000 times. Why? Because trading results are visible. They can be measured, shared, compared. And our egos love comparison. You see a trader post a massive win, and immediately your brain doesn't think about their risk, their losses, or their journey. It only thinks I'm behind. That's survivorship bias in motion. It's not just about what you see. It's about what you don't see and how your mind fills in the blanks. Think of it like this. Imagine walking through a battlefield after the war is over. You see the tanks that made it back, they're covered in bullet holes, but they survived. So the engineers decide to reinforce the areas where the holes are. It makes sense, right? That's where they were hit. But then a quiet voice in the back of the room says, wait, we're only looking at the tanks that made it back. The ones that didn't return, those were hit somewhere else. That realization changed everything. They didn't reinforce the bullet holes they could see. They reinforced the areas that had no bullet holes because that's where the lost tanks were hit. That's the power of what's invisible. And in trading, the invisible is everywhere. Every time you follow a profitable trader without understanding the losses they endured, you're reinforcing the wrong parts of your own psychology. You copy their entries, but not their patience. You copy their setup, but not their discipline. You copy their style, but not their scars. You're building armor on the wrong side of the tank. The truth is, you don't need more success stories. You need failure stories, the ones no one talks about. The traders who blew up accounts and rebuilt them. The ones who learned what not to do. The ones who made peace with uncertainty. Because every great trader, every single one has walked through that battlefield of mistakes. They just don't always show you the wreckage. When you only study success, you create a distorted map of reality. You think trading is about finding the perfect system, but it's not. It's about building the emotional resilience to survive the imperfect ones. Winning doesn't make you a better trader. Surviving does. And the irony of survivorship bias is this: it hides the very lessons that create real survival. You see, the mind loves the spotlight. It's drawn to what shines, what stands out. But the truth hides in the shadows, in the charts that never made it to Twitter, in the accounts that went to zero, in the moments of silence when no one was watching. That's where real mastery begins. In the quiet realization that what you don't see often matters more than what you do. And if you want to think like a professional trader, you have to reverse your lens. Stop asking what made them win. Start asking what made the others lose. Because when you understand what destroys most traders, you'll naturally begin to protect yourself from the same fate. That's how professionals think. Not in terms of glory, but in terms of survival. Every time you look at a chart, remember this. You're not just seeing price action. You're seeing the footprints of thousands who failed before you. Their fear, their greed, their hesitation. And when you start to see the market that way, not as a game to win, but as an environment to endure, everything changes. Because the goal isn't to be one of the few who win fast. It's to be one of the fewer who last long enough to learn. That's survivorship bias. It's not just a statistical illusion. It's a psychological trap, a mental lens that can turn confidence into delusion. And unless you see through it, you'll keep chasing ghosts trying to copy the visible while ignoring the invisible truths that make success possible. The mind is a master storyteller. It doesn't just see events, it creates meaning from them. When you watch someone win, your mind begins weaving a narrative. It tells you that their success is proof that the dream is possible, proof that you're on the right path, and yet that very story might be the beginning of your downfall. Because what the mind seeks most is certainty. And in trading, certainty doesn't exist. When you believe success can be copied, you stop thinking critically. You stop questioning the invisible variables, timing psychology, capital risk tolerance, years of experience. You start to think the formula is external when in truth, it's internal. It's not the system that made them win. It's the state of mind they traded from. And that's something no chart or course can give you. Survivorship bias is seductive because it makes success look predictable. It hides the chaos that came before it. It simplifies complexity into a clean, beautiful story. It says if they did it, you can too. But it doesn't tell you what it cost them. It doesn't show the nights they questioned their own worth. It doesn't show the self-doubt, the fear, the silent breakdowns. It only shows the highlight reel. And when you start comparing your real messy journey to someone else's edited version of success, you begin to feel broken. You start to think something's wrong with you. This is how survivorship bias turns into a psychological weapon. Not one that destroys your strategy, but one that destroys your self-image. You lose trust in your own pace. You begin forcing trades to match someone else's results. You turn your process into a performance. And soon you're no longer trading the market, you're trading your ego. In trading psychology, this is the illusion of control. The belief that if you do everything right, you can force the market to reward you. But the market doesn't reward effort. It rewards alignment between logic and emotion, between risk and self-awareness. And that alignment can't be copied from someone else. It must be built within you through failure, reflection, and time. Think about this for a moment. Every winning trader you admire has a hidden graveyard, a collection of failed ideas, painful lessons, and lost capital buried beneath their success. But because you never see the graves, you think the garden grew effortlessly. You start planting seeds expecting instant results. And when nothing blooms, you blame yourself instead of your perspective. That's survivorship bias. It blinds you to the soil of struggle that real growth requires. Let's go deeper. There are 3 major distortions survivorship bias creates in a trader's mind. The first is overconfidence. You begin to believe the path is easier than it truly is. You underestimate risk. You overestimate your readiness. You start taking trades not because the setup is valid, but because you feel invincible. Overconfidence is the silent killer of consistency. It makes you forget that markets punish certainty. The second distortion is the gambler's fallacy. You see someone win multiple times and believe the odds must now be against you, or worse, that your time to win is due. You stop thinking in probabilities and start thinking in destiny. But the market isn't keeping score. It doesn't owe you a win because you lost yesterday, and it doesn't owe you a loss because you won. Each trade is independent, but survivorship bias tricks you into believing the universe has a pattern. The third distortion is the external attribution trap. It makes you believe success depends on the strategy, not the person executing it. So you keep switching systems. You buy new indicators. You chase mentorships groups and signals, hoping someone else's method will finally fix you. But it never does. Because the real variable isn't the system. It's you. The untrained mind will destroy any strategy. The disciplined mind can make almost any strategy work. When you learn right from winners, you stop asking what indicator do they use and start asking what mindset allows them to wait. You stop asking what pattern made them enter here and start asking what discipline kept them from entering too early. That's how professionals learn. They don't copy the outcome, they internalize the process. A retail trader watches a winner's trade and copies the entry. A professional studies how they handled uncertainty. A retail trader celebrates profits. A professional studies emotional control under pressure. A retail trader looks for certainty. A professional learns to operate without it. This is what it means to learn right from winners. True learning begins when the ego quiets down, when you stop trying to be impressive and start being curious, when you stop proving you're good enough and start exploring why you react the way you do. Every trade you take is a mirror. It reflects not the market, but you, your fears, your greed, your need for validation, your hidden impatience. That's why trading is so brutally honest. It's not about money, it's about self-awareness. The irony of survivorship bias is that it promises shortcuts, but it leads you further from truth. It tells you to imitate success, but it hides the suffering that forged it. It tells you to focus on results, but it blinds you to the process. In the end, it makes you believe success is about what you do, when in fact it's about who you become in the process. If you want to evolve as a trader, you must unlearn this addiction to appearances. Because trading is not a show, it's a conversation. A conversation between your logic and your emotions, between patience and impulse, between discipline and chaos. Every trade tests which voice you'll listen to, the voice of noise or the voice of truth. To see through survivorship bias, you have to cultivate the ability to see what isn't shown, to question the story, to ask, what am I not seeing here? That simple question can save you years of frustration. Because most traders lose not from ignorance, but from illusion, the illusion that they understand what they see. But what you see is only half the story. When you scroll through those winning screenshots, remind yourself for every account that doubled, there are dozens that disappeared. For every story of triumph, there are countless untold stories of pain, and yet both are valuable. Because pain teaches humility. Failure teaches awareness. And awareness is what transforms a gambler into a trader. That's why professional traders don't chase wins. They chase understanding. They know every win carries a hidden danger complacency, and every loss carries a hidden gift awareness. When you understand that, you stop being reactive. You stop measuring yourself against others. You stop living in comparison and start living in curiosity. You begin to study the market the way you study yourself, with patience, honesty, and respect. That's the mindset that lasts. That's what it means to learn right from winners. There comes a moment in every trader's journey when the charts stop being the enemy and the mind becomes the battlefield. It's no longer about finding the next setup. It's about facing yourself. Because the market doesn't punish you for being wrong. It punishes you for refusing to learn. And that's where most traders get stuck, in the endless cycle of chasing success instead of understanding failure. You've seen it happen. You make a mistake, you feel the pain, and instead of reflecting, you run to find a new strategy, a new indicator, a new guru. You don't heal, you hide. But every time you hide from pain, you rob yourself of the lesson it was trying to teach you. That's why the same pattern keeps repeating. The same emotions keep returning. Different trades, same reactions. Because the mind you bring to the next trade is still the same one that sabotaged the last. The traders who truly survive, they don't just change their system. They change their relationship with themselves. They learn to observe the mind instead of obeying it. They notice the voice of fear, whispering, "Don't lose again." And they answer with calm, "I can handle loss." They feel the surge of greed, shouting, "This one's going to be huge." And they respond, "Maybe, but I'll stay disciplined anyway." That's emotional mastery, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to act in alignment with your plan, even when emotion screams the opposite. If you want to learn right from winners, learn how they manage silence. Winners aren't just defined by what they do during trades, but by what they do between them. They review, they reflect, they question their behavior more than their strategy. They treat each mistake as a mirror, not as proof of failure, but as feedback for growth. They don't ask, "How do I win more?" They ask, "What is this trade revealing about me?" Because they know, once you understand yourself, you understand the market. Most traders never make it to that level, not because they lack skill, but because they lack stillness. They never slow down long enough to see the patterns within themselves. They study charts for years, but they never study the mind that reads those charts. They collect strategies, but never question the stories that guide their decisions. And those stories, the unconscious beliefs about money, success, and worth, become invisible algorithms running their lives. Every trader carries hidden code. Some trade to prove they're smart. Some trade to escape their job. Some trade to feel powerful, to feel in control of something in a world where everything feels uncertain. But the market doesn't care about your reasons. It exposes them. It mirrors every insecurity you've avoided, every wound you've hidden, every belief you've refused to question. That's why trading feels so personal, because it is. The difference between an amateur and a master isn't knowledge, it's awareness. Amateurs trade unconsciously, reacting to fear, greed, and pride. Masters trade consciously, noticing those emotions and acting with discipline anyway. That's why professionals say trading isn't about prediction. It's about presence. Presence is what allows you to see clearly without distortion, without the shadow of survivorship, bias coloring your perception. To build that kind of presence, you must start by accepting an uncomfortable truth. You are not in control of outcomes. You can't control the market. You can't control what happens next. You can only control how you respond. And that realization, if you truly accept it, is freedom. Because when you stop trying to control what you can't, you begin mastering what you can, your mind. Here's what learning right from winners really means. It's not about copying their trades. It's about copying their discipline, their patience, their emotional neutrality. The best traders don't react to results. They respond to data. They don't chase the feeling of winning. They chase consistency. They understand that one trade means nothing. What matters is who they become across 1,000 trades. That's how professionals think in probabilities, not fantasies. If you look closely, you'll notice something profound about real winners. They don't talk much about their success. They talk about their process, their mistakes, their lessons. They carry a kind of quiet humility because they've seen what the market can do. They've lost enough to respect it. And that humility protects them. It keeps them grounded. It keeps them surviving. Survivorship bias makes you worship the end result, but wisdom teaches you to love the process. Because when you fall in love with the process, the journaling, the review, the discipline, the patience, you stop chasing outcomes. You start building identity. And identity is stronger than motivation. Motivation fades. Identity stays. If you see yourself as a disciplined trader, you'll act like one even when it's hard. If you see yourself as someone who respects risk, you'll manage it even when it hurts your ego. If you see yourself as a learner, you'll evolve through every mistake. That's how transformation happens from the inside out. Most people think trading is about money. It's not. It's about awareness. Money is just the mirror that shows how aware you truly are. Every dollar lost teaches presence. Every dollar gained tests humility. Every trade is a lesson in balance. That's why the market is the greatest teacher you'll ever have if you're willing to listen. So the next time you see someone posting their profits, don't compare, don't envy, just ask. What truth about myself is this moment trying to show me? Because the more you understand your own psychology, the less power illusions will have over you. And when you stop trading to prove something, you finally start trading to understand something. That's when peace replaces pressure. That's when growth replaces greed. That's when you become a trader in the truest sense. Learning right from winners means learning that success is never luck alone and never skill alone. It's self-mastery. The ability to stay centered while everything around you moves. That's what separates those who last from those who vanish. So remember this, the traders. You admire they're not superheroes. They're survivors. Not because they avoided pain, but because they faced it. They failed more times than you can imagine. But they didn't quit. They observed, they adapted, they learned. And now, their calmness isn't arrogance, it's experience. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing they've been through the fire and still found clarity on the other side. You can too, not by copying their trades, but by mastering your mind, by questioning your beliefs, by embracing discomfort, by honoring risk, by staying patient when your emotions beg you to act, because the real win isn't in your P&L. It's in your psychology. When you master that, profits become a byproduct. Consistency becomes inevitable. Peace becomes your edge. And that's the truth no one tells you. You don't need to be the best. You just need to last long enough to learn, survive the noise, learn from the invisible, grow through the pain, and keep showing up again and again and again. Because in the end, trading isn't about beating the market. It's about mastering yourself. That's how you learn right from winners. That's how you become one. There's a moment in every trader's evolution when the question quietly shifts. It changes from how do I win more to how do I last longer. That's when you start to understand trading isn't about beating the market. It's about outlasting your own impulses. The real competition is not between traders. It's between you and the parts of you that can't stay still. Every chart, every tick, every candle is a mirror reflecting who you are in this exact moment. Are you patient? Are you fearful? Are you desperate to prove something? The market doesn't judge you. It simply reveals you. And until you learn to see what it's showing, you'll keep repeating the same lessons under different circumstances, because the market will teach you whatever you refuse to learn on your own. Survivorship bias makes you chase shortcuts, but the long game humbles you. It shows you that real success isn't in the trade you win, it's in the trade you walk away from. It's in the discipline to sit through boredom, to hold your plan, when fear whispers to close early, to follow your system when greed begs you to double down. That quiet discipline, that's what survival looks like. Most traders never stay long enough to learn that. They want fireworks, not patience. They want validation, not mastery. But the ones who endure, the ones who cross the invisible threshold, they start trading differently. They stop fighting the market. They start flowing with it. They don't force trades. They wait for clarity. They don't seek control. They seek alignment. In the early stages, you trade for money. In the later stages, you trade for mastery. And eventually, you trade for peace. Because once you understand how little control you have, you stop trying to dominate and you start learning to dance. You realize that the market's chaos isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. Every losing streak refines your patience. Every drawdown humbles your ego. Every win tests your balance. That's the rhythm of the long game. Survivorship bias tells you to worship the winners. The long game teaches you to understand their silence. Because the ones who truly last, they don't celebrate loudly. They don't chase applause. They don't need to prove they're right. They trade quietly, steady, consistent. Their calm isn't luck. It's the residue of pain that's been processed, lessons that have been integrated, and emotions that have been mastered. If you want to become one of them, you have to let go of the illusion of arrival. There is no finish line in trading, only evolution. Only cycles of learning, losing, adapting, and growing. Every stage feels like a new beginning because it is. That's why the best traders never stop learning. They never call themselves masters. They remain students, forever refining, forever humble. That humility is what keeps them in the game when everyone else burns out. You see, in trading, survival is victory. Because if you survive long enough, the market eventually reveals its rhythm. And once you feel that rhythm, you stop reacting to noise. You start acting from clarity. You begin to understand the deeper truth. It's not the market that changes. It's you. The same chart you used to fear now feels like an old friend. The same volatility that once triggered anxiety now feels like opportunity. Because your perception has changed. And perception is everything. When you reach that point, you stop chasing success. You start embodying it. Not the kind that flaunts profits, but the quiet kind, the kind that wakes up every day grateful for another chance to learn. You start measuring wealth, not in money, but in awareness. Not in followers, but in focus. Not in outcomes, but in inner calm. That's the wealth that lasts. The longer you stay in the market, the more you realize that the real survivorship isn't about staying profitable. It's about staying sane. Because markets will test your patience, your confidence, your identity. They'll take from you everything superficial until only the essential remains. And what remains is presence, discipline, humility. That's when you become unshakable. To learn right from winners is not to copy their methods, but to absorb their maturity. To understand that success isn't an event. It's a state of mind cultivated through thousands of small decisions made in silence, without applause, without validation. That's where real power lives. So if you're still here, still learning, still refining, still showing up, then you're already winning because you've outlasted the illusion. You've outgrown the fantasy of fast success, and you've stepped into the truth that mastery is a lifelong conversation between you and your own psychology. The market is just the mirror. You are the lesson. One day you'll look back and realize you've become the person you once looked up to, not because you copied them, but because you understood them. You'll realize the winners you admired weren't special. They were simply persistent. They fell and they kept walking. They doubted and they kept learning. They lost and they kept showing up. That's how they survived. That's how they won. So when you watch their stories, don't chase the glory. Chase the depth. Learn how they think, how they wait, how they stay centered when everything screams chaos. That's the real lesson. That's how you learn right from winners. And if you stay long enough, if you master your emotions, your ego, and your expectations, then one day, quietly, without announcement or applause, you'll become one of them, a survivor, a student of the market, a master of yourself. In the end, the market humbles us all. It doesn't care how confident you are, how smart you sound, or how big your last win was. It strips away illusion until only awareness remains. And when that awareness finally arrives, you realize the goal was never to conquer the market. It was to conquer yourself. You realize that the winners you once admired were never chasing success. They were chasing understanding. They were mastering patience. They were building peace. Survivorship bias made you look outward, but the truth was always inward, because the real game was never about finding certainty in the charts. It was about finding stillness in your mind. So trade less like a gambler, think less like a follower, and live more like a survivor. Learn from the winners, but learn the right lessons. Their strength, their humility, their ability to stay. Because in the markets, it's not brilliance that wins, it's endurance. And endurance comes from a mind that's calm, aware, and unshakable. You don't need to be the best, you just need to last. And if you can do that, you've already won,